Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My name is Molly McLaughlin, and I own a company that optimizes sleep through technology, accountability, and behavioral change. Each week, I'll be interviewing world-class experts ranging from doctors, innovators, and thought leaders to give actionable tips and strategies that you can implement to become a more skillful sleeper. Let's jump into your dose of practical sleep training. Welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is Jeff Kahn. He is a co-founder and CEO of Rise Science. Now, the Rise app for better sleep and daily energy is the power behind your next best day, quote unquote. Jeff and his Rise Science co-founder were the first to publish research on technology-enabled sleep behavior modification over a decade ago and have recently completed the largest known study on sleep and real-world job performance across the NFL and sales teams. Jeff's research and work have been featured in the New York Times, Harvard Business Review, and the Wall Street Journal, along with ESPN, NBC, CBS, Fox News, et cetera, et cetera. Jeff holds a BS in Health Systems Engineering and an MS in Engineering Design and Innovation from Northwestern University. You're going to really enjoy this episode. If you haven't checked out the Rise Science app, it's absolutely worth a look. It's beautifully designed and helps you get connected to some of your scheduling throughout the course of your day, how you set up your day, how that can impact your sleep results in the evening, and bringing about that level of consistency that we're looking to achieve with getting great and optimized sleep, but also then really optimizing for energy performance throughout the course of the day as a result, kind of a bi-directional relationship there, and seeing what gets created out of that level of awareness. So I think you're going to really enjoy this podcast. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to hop on over to sleepisaskill.com. Make sure you're signed up for the newsletter. Take the sleep assessment. Each Monday with that newsletter, you'll get our updates of our latest podcast episodes coming out on the world of sleep optimization. If you have any specific questions, you can also drop them into the sleep bot that is on the site to kind of get some guidance there as well. All right, without further ado, let's jump in. Now, before we get into the podcast, I do want to take a quick minute to give a shout out to our sponsor, BetterHelp, or as I like to call it, a therapist in your pocket. It's the exact app that I used when I was going through my really challenging period of insomnia while traveling overseas. And the ability to maintain a consistent therapist in real life was just really not an option for me since we were jumping around from country to country. So the ability to, with using my phone, have video calls weekly with my therapist, I was paired with I connected with a great therapist right off the bat, but I do know other people who have been able to kind of shop around with some of the therapists on that app until they find a great fit for them. And in between those calls, one of the things that I found was really helpful is that you can also send voice notes, text messages, images in between that, longer weekly video call so that you do have this really very real ongoing connection and support that I certainly, at least in my experience, hadn't felt with real life therapists that I had used in the past. And also the pricing structure is much more competitive than a lot of the real life therapists that you can come into contact with. So I found it to be a lot of benefits. I recommend it to a lot of people that are just kind of going through struggles in their life or just simply want to be able to up level and bring in that level of reflection and awareness into their life about what's both working and not working. And you can certainly cancel at any time. And for our sleepy community, the BetterHelp company has hooked us up with 10% off if you go to betterhelp.com/sleep-is-a-skill. Again, betterhelp.com/sleep-is-a-skill. And welcome to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. My guest today is Jeff, the co-founder and CEO of Rise Science. And we're going to give Jeff an opportunity to dive in on a lot of things. And I feel bad for him because we spoke before we started and he has already shared so much information. I'm like, you're dropping so much gold. I'm going to have to ask you to say it all again because it was just fantastic. So we had to hit record. So here we are. So Jeff, would love to hear a bit more about how you got into this industry, part of your background passion, kind of how you got to this place. place.
Yeah. Well, Molly, thanks for having me on. And it's, just a huge pleasure for me to get to, talk about something I just love and has been, I guess what I've spent most of my waking life on, is my adult years. So, it started for me really simply back in undergrad. And, I was an engineering student, up late, pounding the books, up early in the morning, exhausted, just like everyone else was. And, I thought, maybe, my sleep might have something to do with how I feel. Maybe all this caffeine and all of this supplementation and trying to figure out why I feel bad, like maybe sleep has something to do with it. So started to do sleep science research, and I just had way more questions about how it was working than I could find, answers for myself. And so I begged my school's sleep science department to take me in as an apprentice. And it was then that I actually did my first academic paper on taking consumer sleep tracking data and informing better sleep habits with that. So super fascinating work, and just, again, fell in love with the research and academic side of this. And, really fast forward to 2016, we had all of these pro and elite level athletic teams asking if they could do the same thing for their players. And so, we worked with all these fancy, big names in sports or in the NFL and the NBA and MLB, name a pro team, we probably worked with them. Around 2018, just decided, life is short and we've got to work on stuff that matters, and how we spend our time. It's our most limited asset that we have. It's really the only thing that we have. And we wanted to take all of the insight that we had learned from, our time in professional athletics and really democratize that to anyone with a mobile phone. And so that's really what we're focused on today. And, just frankly, happy to share as much insight as I can on why is sleep important? How does it work? How do you get the benefits of it? There's so much mythology out there that hopefully what we get to dig into today is what's based in evidence and what is bunk and not based in evidence. And, hopefully we can dig into some of those topics. So looking forward to it.
Excellent. Yes. And I know you've got lots of gems of wisdom and training and evidence-based background in what you're going to be sharing today. So very excited to dive into more. So I think we could just start at the basics of,
Sure.
Okay, so you created this thing. What is this thing that you created, and how is it helping people to make a difference with that very limited resource of time and the scheduling of the time and the management of their time as it relates to optimizing for their sleep?
Sure. So, look, I think that the next frontier in what we do as a human society and culture and race is to figure out how we better spend our time. And so when you really back that out, and spending time is both quality of time and then how long we have on the planet to live. So if you look at the set of things that can improve that, there's certainly a lot that we know help, but the biggest factor is sleep. And I think if you're listening to this, you probably know that, Molly. Obviously, you know that. It's been your life experience. And it's not surprising to the sleep science community either that sleep is the biggest variable there. I think what people misunderstand, what is not known today, which is so surprising to me, given the strength of the evidence, is how do we get all the benefits from sleep? Sleep is basically, like, Mark Rosekind is a close scientific advisor of mine, and he used to lead the Sleep Research Center at Stanford and at NASA, and just awesome scientist and awesome advocate for the field. And he was telling me, he's like, Jeff, sleep is like oxygen. Okay. Mm-hmm. So he said, when you get less sleep than you need, every single aspect about how you function starts deteriorating. In the same way that if I were to choke you out, that would happen. So, that part we sort of know. And even that can be shocking to people. But when you look at how do you get the benefits of sleep, there's a lot of confusion. Do I need to get more REM sleep? Do I need to get more deep sleep? Do I need to my sleep efficiency isn't very good. Like my wearable's been telling me that my REM percentage is only at 10%. My latency is 2 minutes and now I'm exhausted. Do I need to take some new supplement? Oh, I need to do thermoregulation. Oh, I need to put on these blue light. There's just so much. So how do you explain the days that you feel better and the days you don't? So luckily for us, scientists have figured that out, which has been amazing. And in my opinion, this is the most important, most central finding in all of sleep science. And, the field has been around for about 100 years. The first sleep lab ever opened back in Chicago in 1925. And so since then, we've really learned a lot. And there's a theory put out in the early 1980s that basically said, if you want to understand how awake and alert someone is, or how you're going to feel, there's basically two levers that matter. And there's only two. There's actually now something called the 3-factor model, and it gets a little more advanced. But the big idea is that there are these two levers that matter. The first is something called sleep debt, which we can get very deep into in a second. Basically, it's a measure of how sleep deprived you are. And the second is something called the circadian rhythm, which I know you've had people on to talk about that. And so if you want to feel better, you can basically reduce your sleep debt or you can rearrange how you spend your day based on your circadian energy schedule. That's it. Everything else is basically what I would amount to, noise. It's small 1%, 0.5%, small differences. And so that's sort of the theoretical foundation. And all we need to do, sleep has been evolving for millions and millions of years. What we need to do is figure out how do we get out of the way to let the naturalistic sleep, to let our brains do the optimization that they're designed to do. So that's really, in a nutshell, sleep debt, circadian rhythm, get out of the way of nature. You do those three things and you're covering 99% of what you need to do. So I think with that sort of framework in place, we can go super deep on any one of those topics, or even, figure out, okay, so what does all that mean and what do you do every day? And that's sort of, I'd say, the crux of the whole thing with sleep.
Perfect. Yes. Okay. So I love that framework as a kind of guiding function for this conversation. So you created this app knowing that this framework is in the background. What does it look like, just real quick, so that people have that in their mind's eye of okay, so this is available for me at, not real cost.
So we have an app. Yeah, we have an app at Surprise. You can get a 7-day free trial, and for free, we'll tell you how much sleep you need biologically. So the way sleep debt works is, and we'll sort of walk through it, and then I can share about what we're building. But the way sleep debt works is it's a measure of how sleep deprived you are. It builds up, at least in our research that we've published, over about 14 days. There's other research that shows it's about 30, and you can carry up somewhere between 20 to 40 hours of sleep debt acutely. Now there is, Matt Walker says this, but it's also an area where I think people misunderstand what he says.
Yeah.
I think on the Joe Rogan show, he's like, you can't make up sleep debt. So everyone is now like, oh, sleep debt doesn't exist. It's not a real thing. We can talk a little more about why I think he said that. But what I think he meant to say is you can certainly make up sleep debt in the short term, right? Yes. If you get more sleep tonight and reduce your sleep deprivation, it will benefit all of your performance. But if for 20 years, you've gotten way below your sleep need, there's long-term effect that we don't know how that sort of gets better over time. And it's just very hard to study and for all sorts of reasons, sort of like smoking. So anyway, we can talk more about that later.
Great.
But everyone has a certain amount of sleep they need. The average is slightly over 8 hours. So it's about 8 hours and 15 minutes with a 35-minute standard deviation, meaning most of us need somewhere between 7.5 and 9. But it's not that like some nights you need 7, some nights you need 9. It's that we each have a genetic biological sleep need. So, just like height or eye color, my sleep needs 8 hours and 20 minutes. So Molly, your sleep need might be 7 hours, 7.5 hours. And that's totally fine. We have different sleep needs. And so that's when you don't get that need, you build up debt, and that debt builds up for about 14 days. And last night, while it's certainly the most important, might only account for somewhere between 15 to 20% of the actual weighting today. So, it's not obviously last night matters, but, so do the last 14 nights. So what that does, there's sort of a double-edged sword. On the one hand, if you've been sleeping well and your sleep debt's low and you have one bad night, it's totally fine. You're up in the middle of the night for a couple hours. Tomorrow, you're going to be just great. The flip side is also the case that, if you haven't been getting a lot of sleep, you have super high sleep debt. And for one night, you get 8 hours, kudos, but it's not going to do you much good either. So it's really taking a much more expansive view about how your sleep is working, how much sleep that you have, before you start to judge yourself too heavily on how you feel when you wake up or what happened last night or, any particular day or night. So it is very, very hard to be aware of how sleep deprived you are. And there's some good reason for that we can also get into. Most people are like, I'm fine. I don't feel like I get 6 or 7 and I'm just fine. So we can talk about that too, but that's sleep debt. So what the Rise app will do is take in your data over the last year, whether you have a wearable, if you don't have wearable, we use your phone's motion data to actually estimate your time in bed and how much time you're sleeping. And then we'll actually tell you, hey, Molly, you need 7.5 hours of sleep at night, and you've got 11 hours of sleep debt. And hey, we actually are going to help you wind down properly and then put a plan in place to get that sleep debt down. And then we're also going to teach you about your circadian rhythm. So when you have your peaks in energy, your dips in energy, the best time to be sleeping, it's sort of should be, hopefully, if we're doing our jobs right, very easy to understand once you get in there. So I just encourage you to give it a try, and you can just type in Rise on the App Store and you'll see a purple R and you can give it a go.
Yes, absolutely. And because, again, part of our commitment with the Sleep is a Skill podcast is that, each episode, no matter who we're bringing on, no matter what they've created or, what have you, that we're leaving kind of practical application tips and ways or frameworks to approach this area of sleep and sleep optimization. So, normally I might not just go straight into like, tell us about this thing. What does this look like? And yet I think it's part of the conversation because one, there's not much of a barrier to entry. You can certainly have it tested out for free for the first, 7 days. And then even if you decide to go all in, we're not talking hundreds of, thousands of dollars. Yeah, exactly. It's really providing. That's why I'm really excited about one of the reasons I'm excited about what you're creating is that coming from a background of having, very, very little money growing up and seeing, the difference that led to certain lifestyle, choices and what have you, to have this opportunity to educate across all rungs is really, I think, important. And not for nothing, I really also love that the app, the design of it from a UX UI perspective is very, beautiful and fun to use and to utilize. So I think all of those things together could make it very like a sticky, quote unquote, application for bringing this into a part of your day versus like, oh, nice idea, but not there yet or what have you. Right. And it's kind of something that I think is worth a test for so many people. And especially then hearing so much of what has gone into it. This wasn't just sort of a like nice idea. Instead, it was something that you've really devoted your whole life to and the people that you brought on board.
Yeah, no, I mean, thanks for sharing that. And, we've just seen such incredible uptake with consumers and they're just really, people are getting it. They understand how important it is and like $60 to like fundamentally change your life. It's, while I love meditation, I'm a daily meditator. My sleep is 100x more valuable than my meditation practice. And so for $60 for me, it's a no brainer, but everyone's like, what 60, so we have some reviews in the App Store. People are like $60. I don't want to pay that for an app.
You're like, really? Oh my, yeah.
And, but it's all part of it. And that being said, I mean, we've got literally like, just this story almost brought me to tears. An Uber driver that bought Rise, lives out of his Uber and has bipolar. And through Rise realized that when his sleep debt was high, would be way more prone to mania, which is also true based on the science. Sure. Yeah. And was just like, this is now something I use, every single day. Like it's a tool I can't live without. And so, when someone like that's paying $60, any of us can, right? I mean, we spend more on that and way more than that in coffee per year. So, and helps us continue to improve the product and continue to bring more science-based approaches to weave this into what you do every day. So, and if, by the way, I would say that if money is a problem and it is the barrier and the reason you can't do it, just send us an email through support and we'll take care of you. It's really important that this isn't about money should never be the reason that you can't have access to these kind of scientific tools. And we want to make sure that anyone can have access that needs it.
I love that. Amazing. Such a mission and science-driven company. So I really appreciate all of that. That's awesome. So I would love to also dive in a bit more to unpack this sleep debt topic because we really haven't had anyone discussing this at length. And so my concern has been for a while of when people start utilizing the term sleep debt, my fear has been how I've seen people relate to this is, oh, okay, so I've built up a sleep debt. And so almost akin to like the social jet lag or what have you. Yeah, whatever. The bunch of the days in the week, I haven't gotten that much sleep, but no worries. I'll make up for it on the weekend, and I'll knock that out. And then that's how I function around my sleep. So I'm hoping you can kind of share more like breaking down sleep debt a bit more and how to be empowered around this without then really messing up that circadian rhythm entrainment that we're looking to cultivate by having sort of these like big old peaks and valleys in our sleep consistency.
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, let's sort of break down both piece by piece. So again, let's just take back to the two-factor model, right? We've got sleep debt, which is the single most important metric when it comes to how you feel and function and all the goodness around sleep. It's sleep debt driven. That's the root cause driver. We also have the circadian rhythm, which is really, really important. So let's just play out for a second what's going, at least in your case, where you're saying someone builds up a bunch of sleep during the week and then during the weekend, they're like, oh, I'm going to pay it all back. I'm going to sleep in. So what I would say is you can do that. Like that's a fine approach. And I think with everything with sleep, I think what is disempowering is not knowing why things are changing. We're not knowing why you're feeling better, not knowing when you're supposed to feel good. For example, when you wake up in the morning, It's not normal to feel great and have a bunch of energy right when you wake up. Most people don't know that. It takes about an hour and a half to work off of your sleep inertia. So that's actually the third factor in the new updated model called the 3-factor model. But it takes an hour and a half. So like, don't judge yourself when you wake up. But getting back to it, if your sleep debt's really high, you're also not going to feel very good. If you're waking up or going to bed at a time that's way out of sync with your dim light melatonin onset, meaning when you should be going to bed, when you should be waking up, you're also going to not feel very good. So these are all these levers that you sort of need to think about together. And there's really no, one size fits all once you understand how this actually works. The downside of that sort of a schedule where you pay it back on the weekend is then what you're saying is, hey, I'm willing. So let's say you do that, and obviously it depends on the exact situation. But let's say, you build up a bunch of sleep debt during the week. Well, then during the week, you're not feeling very good. You're not your best self. You're not able to be the best friend, the best partner, the best, parent. So, that's an issue. Then on the weekend, if you do sleep in and you do get way more sleep than you usually get, often you can feel way groggier. And that's for two fundamental reasons. One is you're usually, to your sleep consistency point, either you are, going to bed way later and waking up way later. Usually it's waking up way later that is happening. And so if you're waking up way later, then you're usually now changing and introducing what's called social jet lag, which you brought up, which is that now you're getting light at a time that your brain wasn't expecting. Your brain now thinks that it's, a different time zone. And now you're actually encouraging a circadian rhythm shift, which then that night is going to mean that your melatonin window, the optimal time to be sleeping, is also pushed back later. So, it's not what you want to. Again, that's what is allowing for that, is that we're able to have light, up until whenever we want. We're able to have stimulation up until whenever we want. And this is one of those classic cases where we're getting in the way of our own biology. And so again, what I would encourage you to think about, and it's not so hard to do this, is imagine, taking a Saturday, going camping in the woods where you have a cool, dark, comfortable sleeping setup, but you don't have your technology. That's what you want to be thinking about on a nightly basis. So and just having sort of healthy food around you, not, drinking wine late at night, not having massive meals late at night, because that's not how the sleep systems have evolved. And so anytime you now introduce one of those things that screws it up, it's going to get in the way of, naturalistic sleep, which is a term that Matt Walker, I think, should get credit for. And is just a great term that we're shooting for naturalistic sleep. We don't need to hack sleep. We don't need to optimize it, in my opinion. Your brain will self-optimize so long as it's out of the damn way. So those are kind of a couple different pieces of how that fits together. But, ultimately, there's going to be some weeks where it's crazy and you're going to build up a bunch of sleep debt and you're going to want to pay it back on the weekend. And, that's okay too. And so I think ultimately it's just, how are these things working together? And everyone's starting to get much more awareness around what is actually driving the change in how you feel, and then giving everyone the tools to actually make those trade-offs on a nightly basis.
That was so well said. And I haven't heard people respond, kind of term it sleep systems in that particular way. I thought you dropped a lot of gems in there. So I think that was really well said for sure. And I'm wondering if you could share too a bit more for the person that's listening and is like, oh no, my sleep debt is not just a couple of days, it's years and years. Do you have a particular kind of approach for people or framework for that?
No, so a lot of people are like, whoa. So I guess two big observations. One is, let's say you're like, okay, I've been getting 5 hours a night for 20 years. And I also feel okay. So I think I'm maybe just a low sleepy person, but there's also the person that's like, no, I know it hasn't been good. I've still been doing it. And like, am I okay? So let's break down both of those. So it is actually researchers have asked this question because, if you go from 8 hours of sleep a night to 7, so you lose 1 hour of sleep a night for a week, at the end of the week, your cognitive performance will be similar to being at the legal limit for alcohol.
Yeah.
So like 1 hour sleep loss. So that's 7 hours of sleep debt. With 7 hours of sleep debt, it's basically like you're drunk cognitively. So, it's one of the reasons that fatigue driving is, bigger cause of traffic deaths than drunk driving. But researchers ask the question, how is it that you can be walking around the legal limit for alcohol and not know it? When you're hungry, like you are hungry and you feel it and you will be angry to like go and chase down food, or when you're thirsty, same thing. But when you're sleep deprived, unless you're really, really sleep deprived, you're like, yeah, I feel okay. I'm a little sleepy. So what's going on? So if you look at there's one fascinating paper that looked at this directly, and they basically had 3 groups of people. They had one group getting 8 hours every night. They had one group getting 6. They had one group getting 4. And then they measured 2 things. One was something called the KSS, which is a measure of subjective sleepiness. Second was they measured something called the psychomotor vigilance task. So it's a measure of how alert your brain is. And they looked at what happened over every day. So if you're in the 8-hour group, for the next 14 days, you got 8 hours. And then they would measure those 2 tasks every day. If you're in the 6-hour group, they would also do the same thing. You get 6 hours every day. If you're in the 4-hour group, you get 4 hours every day. You see something really interesting. If you look at the subjective, how people rate themselves, and it's about, I don't quote me on exactly how many questions that are in this test, but if you get scored on a scale of 1 to 4. By day 3, whether you're in the 6-hour group or the 4-hour group, you didn't feel any more sleepy between day 3 and day 14. So what does that mean? If you're getting 4 hours a night for 3 nights, by that 3rd, 4th night, you're like, all right, yeah, I'm slightly sleepy. And by the way, the 4-hour group reported they scored about a 2 on this, a little over 2. That's feeling slightly sleepy. So what this tells you is you can get 4 hours, what we'd expect based on the data is if you get 4 hours a night for 3 nights, you will tell me that you're slightly sleepy and you won't feel any more tired as you continue to build up sleep debt. Now, if we look at your objective performance, what you see is that it continues to just get worse over time. So it doesn't level off. Your brain never adapts to the level of sleepiness you're under. You're telling yourself you're okay, but in actuality, your objective performance is just continuing to get worse and worse and worse. And so what's the takeaway here? One is don't trust your own judgment of how sleepy you are. 2, there's a famous sleep scientist named Bill Dement. He taught a class at Stanford for many, many years called Sleep and Dreams. And Bill Dement's one of the sort of really pioneers in sleep science. And one of the taglines from this class, which is genius, is drowsiness is red alert, which is that if you feel slightly sleepy, that means you are severely sleep deprived. Now, that should both jolt you to action, but you should also feel excited because you have so much better to feel and so much better to perform just by getting a little bit more sleep. So that's really, really exciting. If you're feeling anxiety, you're feeling, a little bit depressed, you're not feeling yourself, you're not feeling, empathetic like you normally are, you're not feeling creative, and you're feeling slightly sleepy, the place to start is getting your sleep right. It will only help you go in the right direction and get that nailed first, and then start talking about everything else. And so that's sort of, I don't know how we got to this tangent, but
no, that's perfect. I love that. There were so many gems in there. And so from that place, what I think is really interesting too, is it's this weird paradox in that we have these signaling mechanisms. We can't necessarily, to your point and to others' points, trust our own signaling mechanisms per se, because unless we know what to look for, like you're, speaking to and educating.
You're slightly drowsy.
Right. Slightly drowsy. Exactly. So one, we can certainly educate and start to know what to look for. And then on the other hand of it, I think what's really important about what you're creating is, sleep as a skill. We're really big on this intersection between technology, accountability, and behavioral change to influence sleep. And so at the same time of that naturalistic kind of sleep approach, but then also the cat's kind of out of the bag with technology. We're, surrounded by so much stimuli. And then, so at the same time, it seems that technology kind of can actually be, we can have a happy marriage at the same time from a perspective of utilizing this pieces of tech to make a difference with our behaviors. So from a day-to-day perspective, then would you have people relate to the app that you've created? And I know you've got lots of different things of what you're going to be, I'm sure, you're such a visionary that I'm sure all kinds of things coming or what have you. But for right now, then can lean into that and start to use this as a bit of a, guide each day with your day, and then how, based on how you're waking up, the drowsiness level, and then actually adjusting your day to fit where you're at and then where you want to be.
Yeah, no, our view is every single person on the planet should have access to how much sleep that they have. Every single on the planet, just like they know their eye color and their height, they should know what their sleep need is. Everyone should know their energy peaks and dips on a daily basis. Everyone should know what's in the scientific world, it's called dim light melatonin onset. But when your brain is producing melatonin under dim light, which is sort of, the biological time window to be sleeping, we call it melatonin window in the app. But those are just things that everyone should have access to, right? Because without that, it's very hard to be aware of what's actually happening and what to do. And as things change and your sleep changes, and you stay up. I've got a 22-month-old daughter, she keeps me up late at night. Like, your life is so dynamic. And so you need to rely on tools that can help you. And, look, I think our view is that technology is just a great potential for good and for bad. And consumer technology, is one of the greatest forces on the planet for change, right? I mean, look at Facebook, look at Instagram, look at TikTok. The amount of time we spend on that stuff is just mind-boggling, and it's potential for good or for bad. And so, because we're there, that's why we think about that's such a key place to own and really help people, take advantage of their technology for good. And that's something that we're really motivated to do. So yeah, I mean, I think you're right on that. It's kind of a combination of like, you got to understand the educational piece. Behavior is at the core of this. And I absolutely believe, technology can help. I'm absolutely on the camp of like, wearables can be great if you use the data in the right way and understand the data in the right way. It can be an incredibly helpful tool. Things like, blue light blocking glasses, things like really comfortable sleep masks, things like all of that stuff can help. And we need all of that to help. It's not going to be just one thing that is going to be able to solve all of this. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that your app does a great job of parsing out that information, because so many people could listen and like, well, I don't need all that. Just sleep is natural. It's, primal, yeah. And yet I think to help educate of how many things just that we're interacting with on a day-to-day basis and from a societal perspective is influencing our behaviors in ways that we just have not evolved to be able to have not impact our sleep regularly. Yeah. So what you're doing is huge.
The opposite. Like our evolution has actually evolved us so that we're numb to the effects of sleep deprivation.
Yes.
Because we should. Right? Like before 100 years ago, there was no electric lighting in the mass market, and it got dark. And so you have candle lights. Like I'd encourage you, I actually did this in college. I'd walk around the house that I lived in college with a jar candle I bought from Amazon. I take a shower with it. I actually still do it now. I can tell you about my whole, nighttime routine, but like,
yeah, we're going to get there for sure.
Night, turn off all of your lights and just walk around with a candle, and you will be like shocked at how sleepy you feel, how much better you sleep. And so we actually evolved to when, we needed to be up for 20 hours a day because we were escaping some sort of danger. That's what we evolved to do. And so it's a great evolutionary mechanism. It just does not serve us well in today's day and age.
I'm so glad you mentioned the candle thing, because we had an anthropologist on who also spoke to, he's a professor out of Toronto, and would give the suggestion or urging or challenge, a candlelight challenge to his students, and 0.000 or what have you, if people would actually ever take him up on this challenge for at least 2 weeks post sunset, just use candlelight as your main primary light source, and then notice the effects of exactly what you're saying. And few people will actually do that. But if you do that, please, if you're listening, give that a shot. But then beyond that, then just to begin to notice how many things that we might be a blind spot to us are actually influencing our biology is really important. And then one quick thing before we get in, because I absolutely want to hear more about your relationship to your sleep and how you manage this. And then just real quick from a even productivity perspective, and then throughout the day outside of sleep, on the app, there's lots of guidance of how to kind of maximize energy states. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about that from even, a lot of entrepreneurs tend to listen to this, or people that have the ability to make their own schedule. And even if you can't make your own schedule, you're not, out of this conversation, but how to utilize your time efficiently.
Yeah. So, look, sleep debt, as much as it's great to be able to control it, through behavior, there's just going to be times when you can't. There's just, life is going to get in the way for a variety of different reasons. And so when that's the case, you can rely on your circadian rhythm to sort of cope and make it through the day as best as possible. And so what's neat about the circadian rhythm, and I'll just give a super high level overview for everyone listening. You've got a part in the brain called the SCN, the suprachiasmatic nucleus, controls at a cellular level. And this is kind of an amazing way to think about it. But if you remember back to high school biology, ATP, and that's what's being actually generated by the mitochondria in your cells. It's sort of, ATP is the sort of fuel for all of your cells. Literally, the SCN is controlling at a metabolic level how much ATP is produced over the day. So what this means, circa dien. So circa is Latin for around, dien is Latin for day. So it's this around a day rhythm of all of our functioning. So everything emotional, everything physiological, everything cognitive, all sort of correlates with what's happening with this SCN, either sort of upregulating those things. So more energy, better emotional outcomes, better physiological outcomes, better relational outcomes, better cognitive outcomes, or it's down regulating it. You're a little bit sleepier, your energy's not as good, all of those things are in the down direction. And so when you know that and know how those are shifting on a daily basis, because they can change by up to an hour, or a little bit more than that every day, that's going to then shift. Well, when should you have, a hard meeting with a spouse? When should you have a hard meeting with a coworker colleague? When should you work on that big project that is the big rock you need to move that week? When should you have your sort of more admin tasks that are catching up on, expenses, or, the stuff that just doesn't take your full brain power? When should you go have lunch, since we're all at home during COVID right now? So a lot of these just very basic questions, by rearranging your day, you're going to get this huge gain in terms of outcome. And so you've seen it in the business world. I think there's this whole kind of movement now towards managing energy, not time. That it's not about 8 hours in your seat. It's about what's the outcome, and then how do you get there most smartly. And if you're trying to answer that question, the circadian rhythm is where you start. Now, if you look in all the apps in the App Store, there hasn't been a great way of visualizing that and using that as a tool every day for productivity. And that's what we're trying to make happen. So, we want to be both very rigorous on the science and how we're doing the modeling, but we also want to make it really easy for you to be able to use on a daily basis to help plan your day and know, hey, I'm going to be groggy from 9 to 10:30. My morning peak is going to be between noon and 1:30. My dip is going to be between X and Y. And actually, my wind down, I need to finish work by 9:30. And we'll text you, hey, Jeff, stop working, start your wind down routine, and get ready for your melatonin window, which tonight is between 11:30 and 12:30. So it's all kind of comes together. And then when you know that, what it sort of unlocks is that if you've, I think everyone listening has probably heard of a bunch of sleep hygiene hacks and tips and all sorts of stuff. Those usually only work well when they're actually based on your circadian rhythm. So for example, don't drink caffeine. Well, that's a generally good thing to do, but I love coffee. Most people really love coffee. And so the question is well, when should I stop coffee so that it doesn't actually interfere with my melatonin onset? Or hey, I actually want to watch Netflix. How much Netflix should I watch so that it doesn't interfere with hitting my melatonin window? Or, hey, I want to work out. When's the best time to do that so that I can get the most out of my day and not interfere with my peaks? So all of this stuff, once it sort of is layered onto your circadian rhythm, starts to make a lot more sense versus just saying oh, don't have big meals before bed. And because it's not specific, and I know Near y'all talked about this, you need a trigger, and the trigger needs to be personalized and based in something real. That's sort of what we're able to do and sort of bring that technology. So that's sort of how to think about that. But yeah, it's absolutely part of how I work every day.
Oh, I love, wow. So I think we can shift gears to you a little bit to kind of learn by example of what, and I'm not saying that, I'm sure you're evolving on some of the habits that you have and testing different things. And I'd imagine, but at the same time, just kind of where you're at, a snapshot of where you're at as it relates to your sleep right now, I think will be really interesting. A couple questions as it relates to that is just the first one, what does your nightly sleep routine look like? And we ask these questions because presumably on a podcast like this, most of the people that are showing up here are really invested in sleep. And certainly you are someone that has been for years and years just immersed in this world. You've so much so that you created a company around this or co-founded and CEO. And so from this place, what is it that you're doing with your nightly sleep routine? What does that look like?
Yeah, so I will tell you, I am in my afternoon dip right now. So I just...
Oh, we should have scheduled differently. No.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
So I actually have a Calendly integration that I can schedule meetings in my peaks and in my dips. So that's...
Oh, wait a minute. Tell me more. Wait, a tangent, side note. Is that available in the app or is that something you built?
It will be, yeah. Right now it's internal.
I love that.
Energy level. I can see where they are in their circadian day and, know when to have conversations, all that stuff. So I've got 3 hours of sleep debt.
Oh my goodness.
That's where I'm at right now.
Perfect. I am so interested in that option. I'm going to want to hear more about that. That's amazing.
So I've got 3 hours of sleep debt right now, which for me is actually pretty decent. I like to be 3 or under personally. That's when I start to feel really good. When I get between 3 and 5, I know that night sleep really needs to become a top priority. So I'm just binging Peaky Blinders right now. I love it wind down. It's an
Yes.
incredible show. And so like my night routine is actually, I get a text from Rise at around 6 o'clock that tells me when I should stop working, tells me, when I should be like winding down and getting ready, when I should take care of my personal chores. So, today I'll basically stop working, or a typical day for me is I stop work and I like put my work away. And then what I do is I think, and Rise also helps you do this, but there's some emerging science around sort of how you plan your wind down routine. So one of the things that we really try and focus on is, and that we all do at Rise, pretty religiously, is we say, okay, what's like the most challenging or sort of most like maybe stressful thing you have to get done? Maybe for me, it's like making dinner, making sure I'm taking care of my personal chores, cleaning up, all that sort of stuff. I do that during the later part of my evening dip, so that basically from, let's call it for me about 9 to 10:30 is like my time. Like Clara's down, she's sleeping. I can hang out with my wife. We can watch a show. I'm doing it with my orange glasses on. There's great science behind orange glasses. I can send you the link to the ones we like.
That's awesome.
So I'm putting those on about an hour and a half before bed. And then for me, one of the things that I find both enjoyable and I think the science is actually reasonably strong on is, I think it's a scientific term, it's just kind of funny, is passive water-based heating, which is just taking a hot shower or bath.
Yes.
But it turns out that that has some thermoregulation benefits that help you fall asleep and sort of stay asleep a little bit better. So I like to get in bath. I have my orange glasses on, and then I'm watching Peaky Blinders to just like relax, chill out. And then, I'm getting in bed, usually around somewhere within my melatonin window. But I'm thinking about my sleep debt to know like, okay, what do I have tomorrow? Like, is it a super important day? Or like, can I stay up a little bit later and hang out? Can I not? So sleep debt becomes this sort of very important metric for me to help inform the trade-off between like, do I want more sleep? Or do I want to stay up and hang out and watch more shows or hang out with my wife or talk with friends or whatever that is? So that's sort of a little sample of how I do it. But I got my orange glasses on. I throw on my sleep mask, the Alaska Bear 2-strap with nose baffle. We've tried pretty much all of them. I think that's the most comfortable that we found. And then, temperature is usually for my wife and I, we like it at 68. Then we're going to bed. I actually put in earplugs because I live near a freeway. We can talk about sound control later. So I throw in earplugs. And then, I'm up later and I don't set an alarm. And I try not to then set any important meetings till at least, 10 to 11 o'clock, where I know that I'm going to be through my grogginess period. And I do actually a morning run to kind of complete the routine very soon upon waking to get sunlight to basically reset my circadian rhythm for that night, to get a stronger melatonin release that night. And it's, I love the routine. It gets me out. It helps sort of mask the feeling of grogginess. I get out and get some exercise, which is good, generally good thing to do. And, that gives me sort of a time to like listen to a podcast or listen to a book and also reset my circadian rhythm. So that's sort of, for me, how I think about it.
I love that. That was so multifaceted because you didn't just stop at the night part. You actually, because it's a bookend experiment. Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then in the middle of the night, if I wake up, which is common, there's a lot going on that's exciting. So I'll be up thinking about something, or I'll just be stressed about something, and I'll be up. Like 2 nights ago, I was up for 2.5 hours in the middle of the night. Yeah. And I had really important meetings the next day, but I was like, you know what? I'm going to it's something called stimulus control, which if you battle insomnia, maybe you learned about, but yes. I get out of bed, I go do something else. I just honestly wasn't tired for 2.5 hours, went back to bed. I got, I think 6.5 hours of sleep total that day. I think I had about 4.5 hours of sleep debt total when I woke up, and that's okay. Like I wasn't beating myself up. I wasn't that's how I was showing up that day. And I knew that, I'm a little anxious. Yeah, probably because my sleep gets a little bit higher than normal. And then I just made sure that night was a priority. So that's sort of how I think about it, even when things, don't go well.
I love that because that's very helpful because, of course, we're all going to have a dynamic nature for our sleep. And certainly since I'm such an obsessive nut that I think I seem to attract a lot of people that are trying to put things into, a perfect sleep routine or outcomes. And then the truth is that just doesn't really happen in life. So I think that's fantastic that you are pointing to that, and then how to manage within there and not get, kind of disempowered along the way or have any sort of like nocebo effect when you look at those results, and instead just use them to be informed about your choices. So that's awesome. Having said that, you answered some of this, but the next question is, what is on your either literal or proverbial nightstand, gadgets, supplements, apps, what have you?
Totally. So obviously Rise, I
Yes.
use mostly the widget. So the widget's like on my home screen and I can see, so
Oh,
I can actually see where I'm at with my energy schedule.
smart.
So it'll tell me where I am in my energy schedule, and it'll tell me how much sleep that I have. And so that helps keep on top. And then I also have it on my watch. So I can see the
Oh,
watch
okay.
health. I can just take a quick glance and say, oh, okay, I'm ramping up. Here's how much sleep that I have. I don't want to remember to open up an app, and sometimes I forget. So it's just super helpful to have it where I am. So that's what I'm using there. I've been using the Apple Watch for its sleep detection, and I'm using the native tracking, mostly because I don't want the REM and deep sleep data. One, because it's inaccurate.
That
Two,
accurate.
it's not actually. Two, even if it was accurate, I mean, if it was very accurate, I'd probably do it just because I want the data, because I'm a nerd about it. But I also know, and Jamie Zeitzer did a fantastic paper on this, basically showing that there's no amount of REM and deep sleep data that predicts how you feel when you wake up and sort of sleep satisfaction. So in my opinion, that stuff is important if you're a scientist, and you're studying this stuff, but not important if you're just trying to feel better. So I don't look at it, and I actually applaud Apple for going in that direction. I mean, I think you had Jamie Zeitzer on, and he even mentioned, he's like, well, I don't know why Fitbit started showing, sleep staging. And now everyone's doing it from Aura and Whoop. And I mean, we love those tools and they're great, but like, it's so misleading, and people are worried about their REM's low and their deep's low. And it's like, there's a lot that, anyway. And my sleep quality score, as Jamie said, like, I don't even know what sleep quality is. No one knows what sleep quality is. The scientists don't know what sleep quality is.
And I'm glad you're speaking to that. Yeah, because I'm often, just about every, podcast or whatever I go onto is really speaking to, I'm continually shocked at how many people and, people that have been, you would think would know, don't know just how inaccurate some of those sleep class categorizations are on so many of these wearables, and will really look to these and, oh, wow, I got to optimize my deep sleep or my REM or all these sort of things. And it's kind of, it can have ill effects for sure.
Yeah. And it's just not, your brain. I mean, the short answer, because you probably have people that are using all this stuff. The short answer is that, like, again, naturalistic sleep, get out of the way. Your brain is self-optimizing exactly how much you need. So like, do not mess with it. Don't think you need to optimize it. Your brain's doing it for you, and get out of the way. So, so even if it was perfectly accurate, which again, Jamie did in his lab, they did PSG, it's fully accurate, brought in top machine learning scientists, tried to figure out, could we predict how people feel with this stuff? You can't. And he did it as sort of like hey, we want to make a point that everyone that's trying to sort of read into this sleep staging data, that there's not that's not the end metric to focus on if you want to care, if you care about, how you're going to function the next day.
Awesome.
Care about that. Scientists have figured out, it's called the two-factor model. That's what to focus on.
Yeah, absolutely. And just because, again, you're so in this conversation, I'm curious your thoughts on some of the other metrics that people often look to indicate recovery, and how you might relate to any of these. So as it relates to heart rate, body temperature, respiratory rate.
Totally. I know. I mean, look, we used to work with professional athletic teams where like every single data point mattered. They were depending on our data every single day for training and games. And we used to have under mattress sensors where we got beat to be like, I've literally like written machine learning algorithms to figure out like which HRV algorithm we're going to use and how to give feedback against it, and like doing sleep staging and sleep detection. Like, I've literally like I've done that work.
Yes.
And so it's not like I don't know that field. And it is important if you are trying to optimize fitness, right? So like HRV is really just a measure of it's giving you a window into like how active is your stress response system. And stressors can come from lots of different areas. You're sick, you've got a lot on your mind, you ended up having a really hard workout, all that's going to show up in your HRV. It doesn't tell you if it's good or bad. So it doesn't make a value judgment. All it's saying is, hey, your stress response system is active. And so oftentimes what it really takes is pretty deep context about what that HRV means in relation to what you're actually doing. But it doesn't answer any question of if you're good or not good, or all it's giving you a window into, hey, your stress response system is active. So it really, really takes a lot more kind of deep expertise and analysis to figure out what you should do with that. And if you're an NFL team and you have a team of sports scientists that are analyzing the data, and they know exactly how much you've lifted and exactly how many units you've ran, in the last literally every single day, they know what the temperature is, like all of that, then you can make a better informed judgment. But, I would say, again, it's not, if you're trying to optimize fitness, it's a useful indicator. But if that's not your goal, I wouldn't spend much time there personally. But again, I think it's interesting, and yeah, I'm a nerd about this stuff, so I like to have it too. But it's not something I'd think about looking at every day unless if you're not training, seriously.
Got it. Okay, great. So that was perfect. And then for the last question is, what has been one of your biggest kind of sleep aha moments or biggest change to your sleep game?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the first one was this realization that kind of all the things that are out there and products and supplements and like it all comes down to the 2-factor model. So when you think about how you should spend your time, you should think about, is it going to help me with my sleep debt? Or is it going to help me better arrange my day with my circadian rhythm? Like those are the two questions. So again, if you're going to spend $2,000 on a mattress, is it going to help me reduce my sleep debt? Is it going to help me rearrange my day based on my circadian rhythm? Well, it's not going to do anything with your circadian rhythm. So then the question is it going to help you with your sleep debt? So here's an area where it might. Let's say your mattress is so uncomfortable that you're waking up a bunch in the middle of the night.
Right.
So now your total sleep time is decreased relative to your need. And now you're building up sleep debt. And so if that new mattress is comfortable to where now you're not waking up in the middle of the night, then yeah, it's going to help your sleep debt and you're actually going to feel better and perform better. Other than that, it's just a matter of comfort and preference. Like what chair do you like sitting in? So, but I think there's, hundreds of millions of dollars spent on the sort of hardware industry about, if you just use our pillow or use our sleep system or use our bed, you are going to magically feel better in the morning. And that's how you should feel. And if you don't, it's because you need to buy more stuff. And that is like just so far from the truth. There's just no evidence that supports that, in the last 100 years. So, again, just bring it back. Like it's sleep debt, it's circadian rhythm. Is the tool that you're buying into going to help you with those things? If yes, cool. If no, spend at your own will. You can decide to spend what you want, but you're not going to get the outcome that you're hoping for. So that's how I would think about just all of that sort of stuff. And so for me, that was the first big unlock. The second big unlock was actually something that I haven't put into practice until maybe more recently, is that just being much more disciplined about my wind down routine and actually how important that is for me, especially as I get older. And I think it even gets more important as you get older and as your sort of sleep system gets more sort of finicky and sensitive, or your own sleep biology gets more sensitive, that like having that routine, limiting blue light, encouraging naturalistic sleep is so essential. And I think there's a lot of work to do there. But that's been the other kind of big thing for me that I've invested in and tried to stay disciplined to. And sort of those two things together have been pretty powerful. So
that's amazing. Wow. Yeah. So much there. And especially I appreciate the emphasis on running your life from and not being run by, but utilizing the lens by which you kind of view how you're setting up your day from a circadian perspective. So it's really what we're speaking to at Sleep is a Skill, is so much of this concept around circadian rhythm entrainment on a regular basis. And what you're speaking to is really, really powerful. And just even if we stepped into that alone and then bringing in this next layer of sleep debt into this conversation to kind of underscore certain times when we really want to further prioritize more than we already are our sleep in our management of our days is just so huge. And I think going to be transformative. And actually, I have one last question for you. Because I feel like...
hit me with all whatever you want to ask.
Well, I think because you're so passionate clearly on this topic and informed, I'm curious, just since you dreamed up this app, what you see ahead as other possibilities or potential. Like, I love what you said about that Calendly integration that like really piqued my interest. What do you see and this is just your own thoughts as from a vision perspective of what could be possible from the utilization, whether it's with your app or what's coming with sleep tech and management of our life?
Well,
big question.
It's a great question. I guess let me first kind of dispel one myth, which is like, we are not geniuses.
Yeah.
The 2-factor model, like I didn't come up with it. It's not a score I made up. It's like guys like Jamie, and there's incredible scientists that have dedicated their entire lives to understanding this field. Yeah. So one wish that I have for the future of sleep products is they are based in actual science, not on their marketing website saying we're based in science, but like they can call up Jamie and be like, hey, Jamie, here's what we're doing and here's why, and here's what's going on behind it. And he's like, yep. Like you should be able to get up in front of a room of sleep scientists and be able to have them be like, yes, that makes sense. So that's the first thing, which is like, just can we get that right? So I'd say the second thing is that, we're in conversation with our customers. We don't know the right way. We didn't know the right way to communicate sleep debt and circadian rhythm and to do that quickly and how to do it in people's lives. Like we didn't know. And the product didn't work when we first launched it. And it just took literally hundreds and hundreds of iterations and begging users to get on the phone with us and talking with them about how they're using it, what they like, what they don't like. And so, our team has just done an incredible job talking to customers and understanding how we can help them. And so it's this combination of both deep commitment to sleep science that exists, deep commitment to what we know about behavioral science that exists, and what our customers are experiencing. And then there's the magic of bringing that all together. And that's, something that as a company, we take a lot of pride in doing as good as we can, because we know that it will have such a big impact on everyone that decides to spend their money and their time and focus with us. And so, we think about what's next, like the cop-out answer is, well, we're just going to find out together with our customers. But right. I'll say the big thing that they've been asking for, and what we're seeing, is that as people begin to trust the energy schedule more and sleep debt more, people become much more like, hey, just like, I'm literally holding up like my calendar to like my energy schedule. Like, can you just like put it on my calendar? Or like I use Calendly, yes. Like I don't want to think about it. Can you just like integrate it with Calendly? So you'll see us do a lot of things around, really helping people make it easier to weave into their own life. That's why we're on the Apple Watch now. That's why we're on the widget. We'll be building into desktop. Like we really want to make this something that's, you don't have to think about it and it's just where you want it to be. And so that's, I would say, the big ask that we're getting. The other thing, frankly, is if you look at our reviews or if you use the app, like we are not a reliable app. Like things go down, like the data is inaccurate sometimes, like notifications stop working. We've just had so much demand that like we can't keep up. And so we're doubling down and investing on making sure that everything we do is reliable, that it's performant, that we have great support. So just getting a lot of the basics, really, really dialed in is something that we want to get right to. So that's really the things we're focused on right now.
I love that. And so I'll just put in my request as a user too, is I'm curious, since we're dreaming up all these things, I'm curious if you could ever, for women's health perspective and women's optimization of, times of the month, because of course, then we have a whole other infradian rhythm to bring into the conversation. So I know we complicate things, but...
Yeah, no, it's something that we hear about, and it's something that we get a lot of feedback on, and it's something that we frankly need to do more on. And there's a great book on sort of specific women's health issues and sleep that is not the Oxford handbook, but is just sort of that a technical manual in that area, and just something that we'd like to solve for. And, big percentage of our customers are women. So we need to be solving. Right now we've solved for everyone, and we need to then get more.
And then it's nuanced down the road. Oh, totally. Yeah. And I wouldn't request it if it wasn't already clear that you're, working on some really cool things. So I'll just, throw another thing at you, see what can come out. So, wow. Yeah, well, this has just been awesome. I've been blown away by the, I already had curiosity and interest and respect for the app that was, that you guys have built. And now after speaking with you, I'm even more kind of enrolled in what you guys are creating, and can't wait to see what else is coming.
Wow, thank you. And yeah, if we can help be of help or supportive, I'd say the only plug that I have is we have a lot of things I talked about on our website for free. We have a sleep guide where we're trying to basically take all this information, make it consumable, easy to act on, link out to all the scientific papers, and sort of make this information just accessible for people. Because right now it's like, this company says that company says this, everyone is science-based, and it's like, what the heck do you do today? Yeah. So we're trying to just do our job to share as much of this information as we can, and do it in a way that hopefully is easy to understand, but also deeply based in the science, and let you go as deep as you want to go.
That's great. And you started to answer some of the questions that I was going to ask you, which was, so assuming after this whole conversation, people want to know more, we've been talking about this app, like what are some of the best ways to, one, download the app, two, to learn more about what you guys are up to, social media platforms, all the things?
Yeah. So yeah, just rise.science. If you want to go to our website, we have the sleep guide up there. You can download the app on Android or on iOS. Just type in Rise and we should pop up, and we're Purple R. We are on Twitter. We're getting more active there. And then on Instagram, we will post we've posted like educational stuff and what's happening. And so you can follow us there too. So.
Excellent. Well, we will put that all in the show notes. And then I know you mentioned that your preferred blue blockers, would love to, include that too. I think that's great. A lot of people, that's like such a big question. So we will include all that for sure. But I so appreciate you taking the time to share all this information with us. And I'm also clear out of our conversation that this was like a sliver of the information that you have acquired on this topic. So I'm looking forward to more to come.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. And thanks for putting in all the time to get this to people's ears. I appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You've been listening to the Sleep is a Skill podcast, the #1 podcast for people who want to take their sleep skills to the next level. Every Monday, I send out something that I call Molly's Monday Obsessions, containing everything that I'm obsessing over in the world of sleep. Head on over to sleepisaskill.com to sign up.